have a lisp, just like Buddy did when he was a boy. He can't say Mexico right. Shh, Mom, they don't pronounce the X in Spanish. It sounds like an H, Mexico. It sounds like a lisp to me. So back to Oscarito. We'll be going into the jungle. We'll visit a ranchero, and there'll be lots of surprises as well. Wait and see. Oscarito smiles, looking right at Bubbles. She's sure of that. Her friend Joyce, who is 75, has a boyfriend who's 52. They play house together all the time, making Bubbles envious. Oscarito might be in his 60s, and Bubbles can pass as 70 or so. They could make a fine couple. We're passing the famous street where Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton lived after he made Night of the Iguana, Mis Amigos. Their individual houses were connected with a passageway. They spent a lot of time in the passageway. He winks and laughs. Did you hear that? Liz and Richard are here. Feather shakes her head. Richard's been dead several years, and they were divorced for a long time before that. You never know. Stranger things have happened. I see it on TV all the time. Look at Mother's ashes turning up after all these years. You can't tell me something funny isn't going on. What do you mean? Feather said. I think she's still alive. This is a different country. Mexicans might have their own way of keeping time. 70 years in Canada might be only a few years here. I'm sorry, it's awful to laugh at your own right. You're always talking about Mexican time. Get it? Feather rolls her eyes and tries not to smile. Never thought of it that way before. Bubbles says, I have ideas about things too. I could have been a teacher like my dad if I put my mind to it. You're not the only one with a brain in this family. Bubbles fluffs up her hair and digs into her purse for her face powder. She checks out her image in the contacts mirror and touches up her nose. The bus rattles to a stop in front of some grass huts. Here we are, senors and senoras, the movie set for the Night of the Iguana. If you look close, you might see the original iguana nibbling some leaves. Bubbles whispers, what's an iguana? They look like baby dinosaurs. They get as big as a cat or a small dog. Bubbles stares out the window, eyebrows pressed together in concentration, hoping to see one. Maybe she can take it home with her for a pet. A little dinosaur. Won't her neighbors get a bang out of that? This proves her idea about time. If they still have dinosaurs in Mexico, then her mother could still be alive. She likes this country. So I'm going to read one final passage. They do get to Mexico City eventually, and Feather has warned her mother not to leave the hotel, even though Feather has to go out. She wants to see the pyramids, and Feather has a fetish for goddesses, and so she's also investigating the goddess religion and all of these things. So the morning after arriving in Mexico City, while Feather is doing yoga in their room, Bubbles disappears. Later, Feather finds her not far from the hotel entrance, surrounded by merchants trying to make a sale. Senora, mira, por favor, de donde es? Bubbles ignores the hands reaching out, dangling necklaces and garments, and waves her own hands as if in a blessing. Feather shakes her head and grabs her mother's arm. Hey, Mamacita, you're asking for trouble. She pushes her away. Don't treat me like a child. I can take care of myself. This is Mexico, Mom. Shit happens. Watch your language. I wasn't born yesterday. Feather shrugs and signals a passing taxi. She's decided to leave the car parked at the hotel. Driving in the city is worse than the alternative, being kidnapped. Mexican drivers have their own code, and she hasn't learned it yet. Each one assumes he owns the road and no one else belongs there. They also make up their own laws as they go. Night and day, the streets swarm with people, reminding Feather of a beehive. Men, women, and children sit on the sidewalk, begging, or they sleep in corners. Vendors are everywhere, selling watches, jewelry, embroidered blouses, piñatas, nail clippers, purses, wallets, shoes, paper flowers. A taxi skids to a stop. Black smoke spurting from the exhaust. Feather helps Bubbles climb into the back seat and tells the taxi driver to take them to the National Museum of Anthropology. He's so short, he sits on several cushions to see above the steering wheel. Weaving through the heavy traffic of insurgentes, the driver presses his hand on the horn, which sounds like a bleating lamb, and jams his foot on the gas pedal. Feather grabs Bubbles' hand, trying to reassure her. For a moment, she feels like a child again, clinging to her mother, afraid. The car swerves around a corner. Bubbles crosses herself up and down and back and forth. Finally, the driver stops in front of the museum. "Quanto costara?" Feather asks. He climbs down from the car seat and fumbles at their door. Feather finally opens it herself, the handle breaking off in her hand. She passes it to the driver, and he drops it in his pants pocket. 18 pesos, senora, he says. She gives him some bills. "Gracias, senor." Bubbles frowns and whispers loudly to Feather, "Why did he say death pays us?" He didn't. He said 18 pesos in Spanish. Well, why didn't he say that? It sounded like death to me. They're walking toward the museum entrance when Bubbles stops, staring, her eyes bugging out at a massive statue standing there as high as a 2-story building. Its stocky shape is reflected in the pond beneath it. Everything in this city overwhelms her. The boulevards take half a day to cross. People throng the streets. And now this, the sculpture that looms over them like a dark cloud, blotting out the sky and absorbing everything around it. She can't walk past and ignore it. It shouts, "Look at me." In fact, the whole city reaches out and grabs her. Murals clamoring from walls of public buildings, vendors' booths creating splashes of color everywhere. She reaches over and dips her fingers into the pond, touching the statue's image reflected there, wiping her hand on her dress. For once in her life, she's almost speechless. Holy smoke, where did it come from? Feather reads the plaque next to the statue. It's called Tlaloc. What's that mean? What's what mean? The lock. You mean Tlaloc? Haven't a clue. Comes from Quetzalcoatl. Wow, it weighs 168 tons. It's the prehispanic rain god everyone used to worship. Bubbles doesn't understand much of what Feather is saying. Rain gods, Hispanic. The words sound foreign. All she can do is stare. Look, Mom, the Quetzalcoatl villagers didn't want the statue removed. They thought the rains would stop and their lives would end. It looks like it's standing in its own pee. Do you think it caused the storm the other night? Could be, Feather says. The night they brought the rain god to the city, they had the heaviest storm ever recorded at that time of year. She just nods her head, mouth hanging open, eyes riveted on the statue, waiting for pee to spout forth. Feather takes her arm and nudges her toward the entrance. Come on, Mamacita, there's lots more to see. They enter the first section, the Olmec period. Bubbles gets irritated with Feather, who stops for long periods in front of the glass cases that hold the ancient art and artifacts. Some of it reminds her of the modern stuff she's seen in Feather's studio. It gives her a stomachache and gas. At least she thinks it's the art that's causing her pain. She doesn't know how Feather can stare at it for hours. It must have an effect on her mind. Bubbles' head hurts after she's been around it for a while. Such mumbo-jumbo. I'm going to wait out here for you, dear, she says, pointing to the benches in the courtyard. So you're going to have to get a copy of the book if you want to hear more. So, thank you. Let me take a minute, in case I forget at the end, to thank Lisa and this wonderful crew of hers, Nola and everyone, for my son, for helping out. And again, I'm thanking you for coming. But it isn't over, because we have another stage that we planned, and that's Nola's going to interview me. And it's a way to answer some questions that you may have and be afraid to ask, and also an entree for you to ask questions as well, if you desire. So, Nola, Does everyone know Norma DeLay? Do I need to introduce her?
That's Ron.
Because I'm going to read it and I get to my sister. She phoned me one time. She said, I'm like, I can't tell you. It's your person.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to start this off with the same way that Lily started, and I'm going to ask Lily, why do you write?
A little louder, Nola.
Why do you write, Lily?
Why do I write? Well, because it's like sweat.
Kathy's going to buy me a book.
Thanks for
It
coming.
comes from my skin, and I can't help but sweat. Especially on a hot day, Christina Lake. Why do I write? I write because I'm really curious about the external world and the internal world. And writing has been my avenue into self-discovery, into learning not just more about myself, but about other people. And it's also a tidy way of, I keep a journal, a daily journal. I write down my dreams every morning. It's a way of keeping in touch with myself and also exploring, whatever's going on in my life. But that's in addition to the writing, fiction, poetry, nonfiction. So I write to stay alive, actually.
Okay, so along with that, how long have you been writing? That you can remember.
That I can remember. Well, when I was 13, I started a diary, and I made up my own language because I was afraid someone might read it. And I don't know what happened to that diary. But later in life, in my, you heard the story, high school dropout, etc. I didn't take the kind of writing classes everybody else did, but something in me knew that I wanted to be a writer, and it didn't make any sense because I hadn't had any training at that point as a writer, and I didn't necessarily write until I started keeping a journal permanently in my mid-20s when I went through a deep depression, and the writing was one of the ways that I dealt with that period of time. So, and I just have been doing it ever since.
Very interesting, thank you. Where do your ideas come from when you're doing your stories, articles, books, and all the other projects that you've got going on?
Yeah. Well, writers are scavengers. Don't trust us. If you have a writer in the family, if you have a writer as a friend, be really careful what you tell that person, because it could end up someplace where you don't want it. But I'm making it sound awfully literal. I mean, I just don't grab something from someone and then translate it. What starts me going is curiosity. If I ever have time, I'll write about Joan Cornelli someday. If I ever have time, because I think she's such a wonderful, interesting woman. One of my short stories started because I have a cousin, a Scottish cousin, who got married in Venice, and on his honeymoon, he got deaf temporarily. So some of you have probably heard of the book Death in Venice. So I wrote a story called Death in Venice. But I wrote it because it was a way for me to fool around. I mean, writing for me is exploration, it's play. I've always been an adventurer. I've always wanted to explore, been curious, and so it's a way for me to be playful and to make discoveries.
That's very interesting. Yeah, would never have thought. But to ask you those questions, we won't know. Are you intentional about the characteristics that you write about? How did that evolve?
Well, I'll tell you a story about this novel that's going to be published next year, Bone Songs. It started with an image of a tornado outside Red Deer that I read about. And there was something about that image that gripped my imagination. I don't know why, because tornadoes can be really destructive. But in the book, out of this tornado came this character who is from Mexico originally. Mexico keeps creeping into my fiction. And I started out, I tried to give her a name, but somehow I wasn't getting a feeling for her as a character. The name didn't work. And then my husband and I took a trip to Mexico City, and we went to Cuernavaca, which is a couple of hours outside of Mexico City. And as we were driving there were these signs, Curva Peligrosa. What does it mean? Dangerous curves. Once I got that name, it's like she just snapped into place, and I could feel her personality. The story, I could then tell the story. I could then get inside her. So intentional, I can't do the intentional thing because it's always, I mean, writing is magical, for me at least. And so I'm always, making that I'm always waiting for those kinds of serendipitous moments to happen.
A couple more questions? Sure. Okay.
If they can tolerate
okay. I got two more, and then I'll let you guys take over. What is the best thing about writing for you?
Well, because I get to inhabit so many different people and visit so many different worlds. You know, I would, if I had time and money, I would want to and youth, I would want to travel everywhere in the world, but I can't do that. So as a writer, I get to entertain a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people. I can be so many different things. I can be an animal even. And so that's, I think that's one of the best things about writing. And I guess the other thing about it is it allows me to interact with others in unexpected ways, like here tonight. So this is a lovely, thing about writing.
Okay. And so then,
The last one.
what? Okay. The last one. All right. What's up for you next, Lily?
Yes. I'm going to go home and go to bed.
She's
No,
had
I'll
a
tell
couple
you,
hard days.
I can tell you all now, but I almost didn't make this event because a week ago, who knows what happened? How many of you have ever had lower back problems?
Yeah.
Okay, 80% of you. So I woke up and I was having trouble moving. It was a mess, and somehow I managed to get here. And I've been having, right before this started, I was having one of my worst muscle spasms. I thought, oh, I'm going to get through this. But it goes away when I start talking. So maybe the best part of writing and talking is it gets rid of my lower back.
It's your natural medicine.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Just wondering, when you're proofing your novel, do you have it on flash drive, and is it different than when you read it in print?
When you're, she's asking when I proof a novel, do I have it on a flash drive, and then is it different when I read it in print? Yes.
Like on a book, in
Yeah.
paper.
The words don't come alive for me on the computer the way they do in a hard copy. I finally learned how to write on a computer. I could only write longhand for many years, but I finally made that transition. But I have to always print everything out And I meant to ask, are there any other writers here tonight besides readers? Other writers tonight who identify with it?
I'm writing a book.
Oh, that's right. Yes, right. But yeah, I need the sensation of having the paper and looking at it and messing around with it that way. Does that answer?
Yeah, yeah. And when you wrote this book, did you how did you go about it? Like with what I did, I wrote one short essays that evolved into chapters.
Yeah.
And then when two pieced together, I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
How do you go about it? Do you just go?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, I'm not being. Yeah, I really have no idea because each book has a different evolution, and I never know where I'm going when I start. And I would hate it if I did. I mean, I don't plot. I don't know what that means. I have characters that I put in motion, and I follow them and see where they take me, and that ends up becoming a story. And eventually I have to, of course, work with the material. What I didn't tell you is before I came for this reading, I was looking back at my notes for this particular novel. I started this back in 1999. And it isn't that I worked on it all those years because I worked on a lot of other things, but it's the kind of thing, novels take an awful long time to write. The question that Nola should have asked me is, what's the most frustrating thing for you about writing? And it's a little bit like being a chef or a cook. You spend hours in the kitchen preparing this magnificent meal, and then it's gone.
5 minutes, it's gone.
And it's gone in 5 minutes. So I feel a little bit like that in terms of writing a novel. I've written 4 of them now, but the length of time it takes me to write the novel, it takes you a few days to read it, and it's gone. But I hope it lives on in your imaginations more than the food maybe stays in the stomach. Yes. Any other questions from this quiet corner over here? Nothing?
When you write, do you sort of have the whole story in your mind, how you want it to start and end, or do you not know the end?
Oh, I don't know anything. And
you don't know the end till it
haven't
ends?
a clue.
Okay.
I haven't a clue.
That is for me.
Where do you write when you write? Where are you?
Well, I never sit at a desk to write. I have a laptop, as you can see, and I just find I'm like a cat. Michael says I move around the house into different positions, different places that feel comfortable, and I just sit and write. And I'll tell you what, as you heard from my biography, I have a busy schedule. I have a busy life, and I usually only can carve out 1 hour a day for writing. And so, but in an hour a day, if you do that 365 days a year, you can write a novel. At least you can write a draft of a novel. You're not going, and then it requires a lot of revision and so on. So, did that answer?
Yeah.
Great.
So as you write, it just grows, and then you change directions.
That's
and
right. That's right.
When it ends, you know it's done.
You get a feeling when it starts to move to that point. You do. So it's a mysterious process, and what did I say? It's why I live is to write, really, and to be with Michael as well. And that's other questions? Well, again, lovely for you, for all of you to come. If you're interested in buying the book, I have to do my sales pitch now, and I think I put out on the table, I even can take debit cards and credit cards. If you can't believe that's high tech, right? But cash is good too, and the book costs $20. If you should happen to buy it, and if you should happen to read it, and if you should happen to like it, don't be afraid to go on Amazon CA and do a review, because it's a very competitive market, and people do are more likely to read a book that has some good reviews. So that's my favorite of you as readers, if you become a reader of the book.
So you're going to do a book launch in Well, in Calgary?
I'm going to be in Calgary,
Okay.
and yeah, it's exciting because there's is it CJWS
I
radio
don't know, I've
station?
lived there for years.
Anyway, they're going to interview me next Tuesday during Suffragette City. Isn't that a wonderful title for a show? and then I have a number of readings while I'm there, including at Page's Bookstore and Kirby Center in Calgary, which is a senior center. And then there's also a festival in town, a writers' festival in town that weekend that I'll be participating in. So, yeah, busy week, and I'm hoping I'll back. But it did fine. I mean, once I start doing this stuff, it goes away. Funny. Just keep talking. Well, I'll lose you as an audience. Anyway, again, thank you. I hope if you read the book that it does for you what stories can, and that's to entertain and educate and illuminate life in its many complexities. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.